In this video, we're going to be looking at the Sigma MC-21 adapter, along with the Fotodiox EF to L mount ND Throttle Fusion adapter with the Sigma 18-35 F1.8 lens on the Panasonic S1. Here's the story. If you own the Panasonic S1 and already own EF lenses, then chances are you already know about the Sigma MC-21 adapter. It lets you use your existing EF lenses on the S1's L mount, giving you aperture control, single autofocus, and lens stabilisation. However, Fotodiox has also released an adapter that does all that, plus adds 2 to 8 stops of variable ND. This is incredibly handy if you're filming outside and want to maintain a fixed shutter speed and have more control over how much light is coming into your camera. But when filming inside, is having the minimum 2 stops of ND a deal breaker? Well, let's compare the two and see some footage. And here's what it looks like in the studio with the Sigma MC-21 adapter with the Sigma 18-35 f1.8 lens. As you can see, this is what it looks like. We're currently shooting with a 4000 ISO, we're shooting Vlog and in 4K as well. And I'm currently being lit by an aperture 120D at 61%. This is just to give you a frame of reference of what this lens looks like without any ND affecting the image. One thing to keep in mind is when the 18-35mm f1.8, which is a crop sensor lens, is attached to the Sigma MC-21, the Panasonic S1 automatically switches into APS-C mode. So it doesn't start off in full frame and then you have to switch it in the camera. It automatically does it for you. For some people, this can be a bit annoying because they have a full frame camera and they want to use the 18-35mm lens on it in full frame capacity, but the camera automatically switches to the APS-C mode, and then when you try to change it in the camera, it locks you out. So that can be a bit of a downside, but the reason that it locks it out is because you get this weird vignetting on the side and you don't actually get a full frame image with this lens because it's a crop sensor lens. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're using this lens with this adapter. Now there is a hack around this. You can just detach the lens from the adapter while the camera is turned on and then flick it back in and it'll go into full frame mode. But it is a little bit annoying that you have to know this hack to be able to use this lens in full frame mode. Now, why would you want to use this crop sensor lens in full frame mode when it looks completely unusable at 18mm? Well, if you zoom in a little bit, then you can actually fill up the frame and have it usable at a certain focal length. Now let's switch over to the Fotodiox adapter and see how that performs. And here's what the Fotodiox ND Throttle Fusion adapter with the variable ND looks like in the studio with the same settings on the lens as before. So now we've got 2 stops of variable ND as the minimum ND in this adapter, showing you the light loss that you'll get from an adapter that has no ND built in to this adapter. So we can correct this, so let's do that now. So now we've changed the aperture to an f2.8 to compensate for the 2 stops of lost light using the variable ND in this adapter. And this is what it looks like. Now, one thing to note between the last shot and this shot, when I was changing the aperture, I came to realize that I'd lost or didn't have any control over the lens through the Lumix Sync app. I was trying to get autofocus just to make sure I was in focus and nothing was happening. I then tried to change the f-stop, nothing was happening. I then went behind the camera and then started changing things physically. And although I was actually changing the aperture on the S1, it wasn't physically doing anything to the lens. So I had no communication between the S1, the adapter, and the lens, which was a little bit concerning. That made me start to think, oh no, this lens is not supported with this adapter. But after playing around with some settings, I was trying to change the S1 from full frame mode to APS-C, thinking that could have been something to cause the no communication between the lens and the adapter. That wasn't the case. And then eventually I ended up just taking the lens off, putting it back on, and then magically it started to work. So that's one thing that I should just highlight when using this adapter. When you put the lens on and there's no communication, it doesn't necessarily mean that the lens isn't supported. It might just be a bug. So hopefully that's something that could be fixed with a firmware upgrade in the future. But ultimately this lens does work, and it was just a little bit annoying that I had to go through that troubleshooting to actually get it to start working properly. So this is what it looks like shooting with the Panasonic S1 using the Fotodiox ND Throttle Fusion adapter, EF to L mount version. with the variable ND 2 to 8 stops. So let me know what you think in the comments. Does this look good? Do you see a color shift? Do you think that this is usable? Does this work for you shooting inside? Having that minimum 2 stops isn't really ideal. When you're shooting outdoors, it's perfectly fine, but when you're shooting indoors and you need as much light as possible, and if you don't necessarily have very fast lenses, having that minimum 2 stops of ND can be a little bit limiting. So let me know how you would combat that. If you're shooting in a studio like I am and you have access to powerful lights, it's not really that big of a deal, but if you're shooting low light, I can definitely see this being a bit of an annoyance in the future. Also, to clarify the minimum ND that's in this adapter, it is 2 stops, and that's been verified on the official Fotodiox video on YouTube in the comment section. On the website, it says 1 to 8 stops, but that is a mistake. It is 2 to 8 stops. And even on the slip that I got with this adapter, it had written on there 1 to 8 stops. So unfortunately, there is a little bit of confusion going around on what the actual minimum ND is in this adapter. And no, it doesn't go clear as well. It does start at a minimum of 2 stops. So let me know what you think about this adapter in the comments. I'm planning on doing some more test videos to show you what this adapter looks like with various lenses, so look out for those. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to this channel for more videos on content creation in the future.